Alright, so the barrel itself is a cold hammer forged chrome lined, and it's a 1 in 7 twist rate. And like I said before, it is 13 inches in length.
Alright, so the XM5, on the research I've been doing on that, I discovered something very, very weird. It has a 1 in 7 barrel twist. So why in the heck would they want a 1 in 7 barrel twist? Because it's totally not needed for 130 grain. You can get away with something like a 110 or something like that, like really, really slow. So I made a couple of guesses, and you guys also made some guesses, and we're going to go through them. The guesses were, 1, it's a marksman round, because they're ultimately going to make a DMR out of it. 2, something for subsonic, because it comes with a silencer. Or 3, it's the stabilized tracer. So let's go over the couple of different guesses and try to eliminate which ones it can't really be to try to figure out exactly what's going to happen here. Alright, now a lot of people were saying tracer unit because the M4, the M16A2s, they all have 1 in 7 barrel twists. Why exactly do they have a 1 in 7 barrel twist when you can't fit anything inside your magazine that would require over like a 1.8.5 or like a 1.9? I mean, it's really kind of on the border there with a 1.9. To be safe, you could run a 1.8 just in case you're in like Antarctica and your projectile powder is burning really slow and you have a slow muzzle velocity. That is because of a round called the M856. That is a tracer round that was a part of the SAW program. And they wanted the M16s to also be able to shoot the same ammunition as the SAW. So, you know, if everything goes sideways and you need to grab some ammo, you can break some off the belt and start loading up magazines. Which, you know, that kind of makes sense. The M856 round is only 63 grains, but it's as long as an 80 grain Sierra Match King. Why is that relevant? We're going to pretend that these two items are made out of lead and copper and they are projectiles. A short and stubby projectile doesn't need to have as fast of an RPM spinning to stabilize it going through air because it's short and it's heavy. And the wind resistance that would be required to break the gyroscopic stability of this and flip it over would be a lot. Now we're going on bullet number 2. It's much longer, it's much lighter, it's narrow, it's aerodynamic. However, the downside is it doesn't take a whole lot of air force going on this because of the leverage it is there to flip it over and put it into a tumble. So it's not actually grain weight that you need a bigger twist for, it's the length. And because this is as long as an 80 grain and it only weighs 63 grains, it requires a whole bunch of stabilization to keep it from tumbling. And like I said, they wanted to also be able to shoot the same ammunition as the SAW. Yeah, we have better projectiles now to where that isn't a problem because we have a better, the burn, whatever it is, the tracer compound is more effective now because you need it to burn for a certain amount of time for it to be effective. So we wouldn't need a 1.7 because this is an obsolete projectile. We have shorter ones now that wouldn't require that much twist. However, when they came out with the M855A1, which uses steel and copper is much lighter than lead, and it's not like the 62 grain penetrators with just a little steel slug in there. The whole inside, there's no lead in there at all. Well, that does require a 1.7 because it's a long projectile that doesn't weigh a whole lot. So that is the whole purpose between a 1.7 with the 5.56. So it makes sense, like, hey, you know, what if they want to run tracer units? You would need a 1.7. Well, that's actually not true. Take 308, for example, or 7.62 by 51. The M62 tracer unit is 1.33 inches. That is about the same size as a 175 grain Sierra Match King, which comes in at 1.38. So basically 175 grain. And the M14 runs a 1 in 12 twist. You may be like, well, hey, you would never put tracer ammo in an M14, so that doesn't really matter. But the M60 also has a 1 in 12 twist, which does shoot these tracers. So what is the difference? These are both obsolete cartridges. Why does this one require a 1 in 7 and this one does not require a crazy twist rate? Because if it were to follow the same rules as a 5.56, you would need a 1 in 7 in the M14s, the M60, etc. That is because the extra diameter that the 308 gives you, there's a much higher payload there. Plus we have newer tracer unit compounds so we don't have to shove as much in there. So the M62 doesn't require a crazy fast twist rate. The M856 does, because this doesn't have a lot of payload room. So they had to make the projectile stupid long. They did not have to do that with the M62. So I don't think, because of our new tracer unit compounds, plus you're looking at a .277 instead of a .22, and the .277 I believe is way closer to a 308 than a 22. Because I mean, .27 close to 30, .27 close to 22. More payload. So I don't believe that we're going to need that much of a barrel twist to be able to stabilize a tracer unit for the 6.8 by 51. Possible, but I'm ruling that one is out. Just because of the new compounds and how much more payload capacity that particular projectile has. Even if you put, just all steel inside and you had the compound in there, I still don't think it's going to require anything close to a 1.7. Remember, they're supposed to be running somewhere around 130 grain, which requires something like a 111 or a 110, and you're going from 110 all the way to 1.7. Okay, so now the next guess is going to be for subsonic, which is a possibility. That might be something that goes in there, but I don't think the weapon is going to be able to function properly if you were to go to subsonic. Like a SCAR, it won't cycle. It'll just go pop and the bolt will move back a little bit, but there's not enough gas there, because you can. You can take a 308 casing and just fill it up with trail boss, basically as much as you can possibly fit in there. You'll be just below 1,000 feet per second with a heavier projectile. So I don't believe it's subsonic. Now the next one is, because the barrel is so short. Alright, so when it comes to stabilization, it's not about barrel length. It's not like it's got to travel through X amount of inches of barrel to be stable. What it comes down to is RPM. We're going to pretend this is a barrel. We're going to pretend it's a 112 twist. What that means is it's 12 inches for the bullet to rotate once. So this is a 112 twist. We're firing out at, just make up a number for velocity. And it stabilizes it. Out of the same exact barrel length, with the same exact twist, bring that velocity down, and now all of a sudden you'll eventually get to a point where the RPM is slow on this, where it is no longer gyroscopically stable, and it will flip over. Now let's pretend that you shoot a projectile out of here and it doesn't stabilize out of this exact barrel, this exact twist rate, just by increasing the velocity. Because it increases the RPM, it can stabilize that projectile just by adding velocity. So it's not because of the short barrel, because we're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,100 feet per second. They haven't actually said the exact velocity, but they're usually like right around, like the ammo you can buy off a SIG, like around that grain rate is around 3,000 feet per second.
Now, the problem that we have is military ammunition is very hard to come by, so we have something that's close. Now, this is the higher pressure ammo. You can see it has the stainless steel base right there.
So pretending that the military wanted something a little bit hotter, we'll call it 31, maybe 3150. 3150 on a 130 grain projectile? No. With that barrel twist, it gives it a 3.39. That's crazy high. Generally, like manufacturers and stuff, they're somewhere around 1.5. Because the more stable a projectile is, the more likely it is to ice pick through the target. You don't want that to happen. You want it to go in the target, start tumbling, doing all that nasty crap. So what exactly would it take to get closer to 1.5, a much more realistic twist, like the 1.7 is with the M856, or the M855A1? That the 1.7 brings it closer to a 1.5. That makes sense why they would go with a 1.7. So on the XM5 or the 1.7 barrel twist, I just started increasing the length and the weight and reducing the velocity until I got to something with a 200 grain projectile at 1.75 inches, moving at 2,500 feet per second. That's still 1.65. The heaviest, or I should say the longest projectile on the market, which is 175 grain at 1.49 inches with a velocity of 2,900 feet per second, that's still 0.36. 2.36, which is like ridiculously high. So I believe that it won't be 200 grain. I believe, well, it could be 200 grain. And if it's a marksman round, it very well may be 200 grain. But I think it'll probably be like 150 grain or like 170 grain, because they'll use a steel insert instead of lead. With a projectile being about 1.75 inches long and about 2,500 feet per second. The downside to this, the argument against that, would be because of how much of that projectile is actually going to have to be in a case. Because we're talking about an AR-10 magazine. The P-mags, I believe, are a little bit longer or shorter. I believe they're shorter. I should have Googled it before I made the video. Anyway, it's something like 2.8 for overall capacity length inside the magazine. I'm almost positive it's 2.8. So saying the casing is 2 inches, which I'm almost positive a 308 is, I'm just going to do a cut right here because I'm going to Google it real quick. Alright, I did some Google searching. So the overall maximum, like the longest projectile you can run inside of a P-mag is 2.95 inches. The casing itself for a 308 is basically 2 inches. It's 2.015. That means the longest projectile you can have sticking outside of your 308 case is 0.94. So let's pretend that they ran a projectile of 1.75 inside of the casing. Almost half the projectile would be inside of it, which would be 0.81, which would make it crazy inefficient and really reduce the velocity. However, a 6.8 with an overall length projectile of 1.75 would have a ridiculous BC. Like, you would be able to shoot a crazy long range. Like, really, really far. And that's why I think the most likely option of the reason of the 1-in-7 barrel twist is to make more marksman ammo, because I do ultimately believe that is going to be a marksman rifle. I know that they said they were going to replace the M4 with it. I just don't see that happening because it's a DMR. Everything about it says DMR. And I think they are going to put some ultra long BC ammunition out there. Something with like a 1.75 projectile. It's doable. It's not ideal. It's not going to be very efficient.
Absolutely. And you're not pushing the bullet way down into the case. When you shove a bullet, especially a long aerodynamic bullet, down into the case, it has a lot of room to wiggle while the ignition is going off. We try to minimize what we call in-bore yaw. We want the bullet to go straight into the rifling, into that engagement, so that it comes out straight. Again, 6.5 Creedmoor, case in point. Why it just shoots well in everything. It's because we've minimized any chance that bullet is going to come out sideways.
But I do think that is what's probably going to happen. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you'd like to help support the channel, I got my Patreon right there. I also have affiliate links in the description down below. Just by clicking on those links, even if you don't purchase what that particular link is for, just clicking on it and doing the Amazon shopping you were already going to do anyway, I have a little kickback for it because you came there off my channel. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.